Welcome to the Hot Seat by the Business of Retail. I'm today's host, Craig Patterson, and our hot seat guest is Rick-Bohonis. He's the co-founder and longtime president of Vancouver-based furniture retailer Urban Barn, and he's now a senior advisor at consultancy Dig360. Thank you for joining us, Rick, today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having
me. And welcome to our hot seat panelists. We've got David Ian Gray, Christine Cowan, George Minikakis, and Gary Newbury. And I'm Craig Patterson. Let's get to the hot seat questions. Now, Christine, let's get started with yourself.
Great. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Doing well.
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
So my question for you is, what inspired or influenced you to become an entrepreneur and create Urban Barn? And really, what's the story behind Urban Barn? How did it all come about?
Very interesting story and not typical. I think in George's newest book, he talks about an accidental retailer. And that is what I was, an accidental retailer. At the time, it was, I think, 89. I was working in the building material industry, and I was at a job site, fell off the second story of a house and broke my shoulder. While I was off, I had the opportunity to start a business with a high school friend. It was the white wire shelving, closet systems out of Florida, and we started that. It was called Homeworks, and we had our first retail location in City Square Mall in downtown Vancouver, and we were doing modestly well, making a few bucks here and there, and we started seeing products, household products at buying shows, and we started following Pottery Barn, Crate and Barrel, and realized that at the time, they were not interested in coming to Canada. We were just too small for them, all the logistics issues as well. So we saw a niche that wasn't filled in Canada, and we decided, why not go for it? And we did.
Excellent. Now, David, Ian Gray, you've got a question for Rick?
Yeah, Rick, so you accidentally started a retail business that grew into something pretty special. So how long did it take for you to actually grow it to where it's become today? How many stores is Urban? Tell for the people who don't know Urban Barn, to kind of describe what it is today. And then were there any sort of key high moments that just transformed that acceleration?
Sure. So we started in that one location in City Square Mall. We realized that we were trying to be very urban, trendy, funky, and of course in Vancouver, Kitsilano was the place to go. So we put our second store there, but what we did was we couldn't afford the rents in the high traffic areas, so we took space a couple of blocks away, and we made a deal with landlords at the time where we would try to get tenant improvement money that was well over what we knew we were going to spend, and we cut a deal where we'd keep the balance of it. And we obviously try to have free rent as well. But the problem there is once that money ran out, we realized we had to do the same thing again. So that worked for us for about 3 or 4 first stores in Vancouver. We grew over the years of first 18 years of business, we grew to 40 stores roughly across Canada. The expansion was kind of steady. There weren't many humps and bumps in there. We just kept going. One of the biggest changes for us was getting into Alberta. We thought we would never do that. We thought we were a BC company and that's all we'd be able to do. Once we got into Calgary and the oil boom, we realized, this is a much better market than Vancouver and most of BC at the time. So that was a big change for us. And it helped us realize that we could move across Canada easily and get into that huge Toronto market as well.
Excellent. I've got actually a question now as well here. After you got really, really big, Rick, you actually divested the business. What's the story behind how that all came about?
Yeah, well, we were approached, I think around 05, 06, by Home Depot, who was Lowe's at the time had not been in Canada, but they were coming to Canada. And Lowe's has a furniture component to it that Home Depot didn't. So just trying to compete with Lowe's, they thought it would be a good idea to try to connect with a furniture retailer and do a store-in-store concept. So we were quite excited about that. It didn't really go anywhere. I think we realized we should focus on what we knew instead of getting into something we didn't know. And from there, we realized that retail was popular at the time with investors. So we approached the same broker that Chip Wilson had used in a financial deal, as well as Brian Hill and his financial deal. And they walked us through a year-long process where we had attracted about 15 strategic investors like Williams Sonoma, like the Brick, and others, and about 40 equity groups from around North America. So we went through that whole year-long process, endless board meetings, pitching our deck, and finally we came to an equity group. Happened to be based in Vancouver. That wasn't a priority. And we chose them. At the time, I think it was the best deal for us at Urban Barn.
Terrific. Thank you. Now, George, you have a question for Rick.
I do. And Rick, what a great story. But how would you professionalize an organization today, both from a talent and technology perspective, to drive scale?
Well, so I think the key to our success, George, was that, we built a business based on culture. And I think we realized early on that talent is important, but loyalty is also important. So we were very loyal to our employees, and they were very, very, very loyal to us. I've got lifelong friends that started with our business early on, and I see them all the time. So I think that's the key going through any kind of new business, is to really think about, who you are, why you are, and make sure that everybody inside of that business, right from warehouse workers right through to top execs in the business, understand why you're there and what you're trying to do. And, I think that that's one of the things that I would do today if I was starting a business, is really look at, this culture and the heart of the business. On the tech side, we started in 1990, and technology was obviously different. The internet was different. There was no e-com at the time, and it wasn't as important to us. We had a point of sale system, inventory control, that kind of thing, and some consumer data collection, but the rest of it wasn't important to us. But as time went on, we certainly grew with technology as it grew. And, the companies today, they've got a little bit of a head start that we had. I mean, kids grow up with tech, and they're completely comfortable with it. So businesses today are a little bit different. And I think if I was to start today, I'd feel differently about tech as well.
Yep. Now, Gary, you have a question for Rick.
Yeah, Rick, good to see you again. The last 18 months, we've seen a significant acceleration in e-commerce adoption by consumers. If you still had Urban Barn, what would be keeping you up at night as the business attempted to rapidly scale and adapt to this need?
Yeah, one of the things that we didn't have to worry about at the time, and even up to the time that we sold the business, we brought in an equity partner, let me put it that way, was that e-commerce was not as strong as it is today. And that is, you hit the nail on the head there. Companies like Wayfair, Article, and there's a number of brick and mortar that are doing really well on the e-commerce side as well. So that competition is really difficult for a more traditional brick and mortar type business that is slowly getting into e-commerce. The problem that I think a lot of that type of retailer finds is that it's difficult to compete price wise, and obviously, businesses are looking to promote their product based on value more than just price, but sometimes that's difficult to convey online. So some of the retailers that are out there, the online retailers, have really eaten into the market, and it really does make it difficult. You really have to think about your strategy when it comes to your online presence and obviously how you deal with e-commerce. I mean, I think there are companies out there that are doing the right thing by buying products specifically for online sales. So product that you might not even see in the store. That gives you a bit more of a competitive edge, because product in store, you're not going to change those prices. You don't want to start messing with your margins too much. So I think that's a real issue and something that has to be looked at.
Now we'll pause for a moment for a message from our sponsor.
This segment is brought to you by Salesforce, the world's #1 CRM platform. To learn more, visit salesforce.com.
So now, Christine, you have a second question.
Yeah, Rick, how do you manage through transition when you're facing a creative or a business block? And then what advice would you give to someone in that regard?
Well, so obviously one of the key words in business right now is to be nimble, and so many businesses have had to do that because of COVID and the circumstances over the last year and a half. But I think one of the things, Christine, is that businesses, I believe, need to be proactive and not reactive. And from my perspective, what I would do is I'd try to think of what was potentially going to happen next. And we kind of did that back in the day when, recessions hit, and we looked at turning the business around a little bit. What can we do other than sit back and moan and groan about the whole situation? So we looked at different markets. Traditionally we wouldn't be selling to higher end consumers, but we had what I called trading up, where people with money still wanted to spend money, but they didn't want to look gauche going through a recession. So we took advantage of that. But that's just a small example of minor things that can make impact in a difficult situation. I mean that nobody there. Dusting off your crystal ball is not necessarily going to help you. But what it would do is make you really start bringing your team together and thinking, okay, let's sit down, let's put a strategic plan together for the next 5 years, 10 years, but with some twists in the road potentially. So I think that being proactive is what I would suggest to anybody that is looking to scale their business and look at potential risks in business.
Excellent. And now, George, on to you. Second question.
Great, thank you. And Rick, how would you entice investors today, and what would they want to see by investment grade value in a consumer brand?
Well, so in our case, and I think in a lot of cases, there are two types of investors. There's the strategic investor, and businesses that are looking for a strategic investor as well, somebody to help them grow their business that really truly understands the business. And then there's the equity side, and don't get me wrong, there is equity out there that feels the same way. We want to grow this business. We're not just buying it to flip it or to go public or whatever the situation is. But I think, and they're very different circumstances. Obviously, strategic, they're not looking to do that. Generally, they look at ROI a little bit different. It could be a longer term. I think with when you're looking at the equity side, you're really playing to their return on investment numbers. Financial numbers are quite a bit more important than maybe the strategic side, because it is a longer play. So I think when it comes to investment these days, as a business, you have to really choose what makes sense for your business. If you're looking at an exit, is that part of your exit strategy? either of the two could be the way to go. But then, you're not thinking too much about where the business goes a month from now, 2 months from now, or a year from now. If you're staying in and you're growing the business, then you really have to look at who your partner is and how they can help you grow, besides an infusion of money.
Excellent. And Gary, you've got another question for Rick.
Yes, Rick, so reflecting on any logistics challenges with peak or major events at Urban Barn, how would you describe the supply chain design of a business, and how was it able to adapt to rapid changes in either volume or mix or both?
Yeah.
What did you find helpful? What did you find helpful in keeping up with demand patterns?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Gary. Look what's happening today in supply chain. I know businesses out there that are absolutely struggling because they can't get product, and they're, it's really affecting their businesses. And some of them are to the point where they have to wrap up their businesses just because they have nothing to sell. So, when at Urban Barn, we actually lived through at least one or two Vancouver port dock strikes that really set us back. But, we were lucky enough at the time that, as we grew, we started adding warehousing and proper inventory planning. And we were able to hold enough inventory so that when the real crappy stuff started happening, we were okay. We had product. And maybe, that not everybody can do that. A good example is the one or two off the indies. They don't hold much inventory, so they're really held captive by that supply chain. So finding potentially reliable Canadian sources might be an answer to that, where, as long as they're manufacturing here and not just bringing in product from overseas, because you're back to the square one with that. But it is a really tough one, Gary. I don't have many answers on that, just opinion that, again, go back, bring your team together, especially the buying team, warehousing, and take a look at what might occur and how do you deal with that ahead of time, being proactive.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, David, you've got a second question for Rick as well.
Yeah, I'm loving the sort of future and present tense questions my colleagues have been asking you, Rick. But I want to harken back to when you did exit, and at that time we mentioned Chip Wilson and Brian Hill. For those who don't know, that's Chip Wilson, who grew and exited from Lululemon, and Brian Hill's still in at Aritzia, but also took on equity around the same time. We've heard so much about those two Canadian successes. I'm going to put you on the spot. How do you feel about the legacy of what you created at Urban Barn? And, if there's something that you did that really set yourself up for that success, what would it have been?
Well, first of all, extremely proud of what we created. Again, we started a business on our credit cards. We had no investment. The only money that we really had was from BDC. BDC was open at that time to retail loans and almost unsecured. I'm not sure that's happening today, but it's really interesting to look back and what did we do differently. I love the word differentiation in business, and we tried as much as we could in a very, what I consider a very staid category, furniture. Furniture really doesn't lend itself to a lot of flash, where you can look at the clothing market and you can be absolutely flashy and very creative. But, I think one of the things that we really tried to do a lot in our marketing, we were crazy with some of our guerrilla marketing. Maybe at another time I can tell you a couple of really crazy stories of what happened. One of them was what we did during the 210 Olympics, where we took a small store downtown and we turned it into a condo and had one of our store managers live in it. for the duration of the Olympics, and he did not leave. We streamed everything that happened there. We had nonstop events during that time. But, other things just when it came to store openings, we do some really interesting graphics that potentially would get us into trouble every once in a while. But we would just say, hey, we didn't know we couldn't do that. And we got away with it. So I think the way we presented ourselves was different. But Dave, it's really difficult in a category where it's difficult to be flashy and interesting.
I have one very quick follow-on, and it's a yes or no answer. There's no in between.
Okay.
Do you feel that the Canadian business press understated the Urban Barn story?
Yes.
Done.
Yes.
And I'll ask a question here now as well, being part of that press, perhaps. And I'm actually going to ask a two-parter. The first question would be, do you regret giving up the Urban Barn business? And then secondly, what have you been up to recently?
So on the regret side, there's a little bit of both, Craig. I think, I love the business. I love the people part of the business. Once we brought on an equity partner, things became very difficult. Obviously, we weren't in control of our business. So, the regret on that side, there is no regret on that side. I was happy to leave that business when I did. But yeah, I'm very extremely proud of what we as a group built at Urban Barn. And, every time I see an Urban Barn sign, it brings a little tear to my eye. Not really, but that's the only regret. The rest of it is, I think we made the right decision at the right time. We brought in a very strong equity partner that obviously anybody that's a fan of Urban Barn is quite happy the direction that they've gone in. They've really moved into markets that we weren't sure we could get to. So that part of it, there's no regret on that side. But again, as a builder of a business, you certainly miss the being there every day and seeing the same people and really enjoying, seeing the growth in the business. That was really exciting. So in the second part of it, I've been obviously involved with Dig 360. Back in about 2005, I met David and actually brought his business into ours to do some work on the consumer research side. We at the time we thought we knew our customer very well, but we really didn't, and so we went through a major exercise to really learn. And in that process, we learned way, way, way more about Urban Barn as well. So that was an interesting time for us. And so when I left and retired for a while and kept in touch with David, and obviously we're good friends, he asked if I'd like to join their team, and I did. In and around that, I've dabbled in some mentorship, but also I was lucky enough to get into the cannabis retail industry in Ontario. We had a partner, and we were lucky enough to gain a license in the second round of the lottery there, and it was one of the craziest times, 1.5 years of my business life. I know a lot of people have heard the story that our store, we actually had a partner, a licensed agreement with a very well-known Canadian cannabis brand. And our store opened very first day. We did $85,000 in revenue. I've never seen anything like that in it. And we're talking about 2,500 square feet. In the first month, we did 1.3 million. Admittedly at some slimmer margins that I was used to seeing in furniture retail and other retail. But when you're doing that kind of revenue out of that size space, it was absolutely mind blowing. So again, a little bit lucky in being in the right place at the right time. But hey, sometimes you have to take chances to get things done. So
Terrific, thank you. And that concludes the hot seat. Join us for the Business of Retail discussions starting right now.
As retailers entered the lockdown in March 2020, a small, diverse group of Canadian thought leaders gathered to virtually speculate, collaborate, and share their insights on the waves of disruption facing retailers. The Business of Retail podcast emerged as an unflinching strategic alternative to the conventional discourse, revealing challenges in the headlines and exploring new, unconventional paths for all facets of the retail industry. Now, here's the panel.
Thank you again, Rick, for joining the discussion and our panelists. Our panelist bios are in the show notes, and our panelists include branding and marketing specialist Christine Cowan, founder of Innovate Strategies; experienced CEO George Minikakis, founder of Retail Inception Group; retail strategist and founder of consultancy Dig360, David Ian Gray; senior executive on call for rapid performance improvements across retail supply chains and last mile, and founder of RetailAid.ca, Gary Newbury; and I'm Craig Patterson, founder and editor-in-chief of publication Retail Insider. Now, let's get into the discussion here. And the whole topic is going to be basically, Rick, if you were still in the retail game, what would scare the heck out of you?
Oh, where do I start? First of all, I think most retailers now realize that COVID or coronavirus is not going away, and we may have to live with this sort of business life for quite a while. So, does that scare me? It does, but I think the opposing side to that is that it leads. It could open some doors when it comes to how you run your business in the future. You have to really, as a retailer right now, everybody is in the same boat. I believe it's hard to find staffing, good labor. A lot of employees have taken a year off to really look at their lives, their business lives, where we're going, and some of the jobs that were very common in the past, they're not interested in right now. And I guess it depends on age group partially. But so I think I would be very concerned about where I'm finding good people to work inside of the business, especially on the front lines, where now you've got extra concern when it comes to as somebody on the floor that all of a sudden may have to deal with unruly customer. That's not something that they really want to have to handle, and I certainly wouldn't. So, those are the kind of things that I think are that retailers really have to look at and try to find solutions for. They're obviously supply chain. Gary knows this very well, that a lot of companies are struggling to stay afloat because they can't get product. And it's, in a lot of cases, you're buying product well ahead of time. You're slapping down money. And if you can't get that product for quite a while, it really hits your bank account, and it's going to affect what happens over the next while. So, there's a number of things. That's just a few from my side.
Rick, can we stay on the topic of people for a second? Because one of the things that I really took note of with Urban Barn that you created was a very strong sense of cultural difference within the company, and employees all the way through that were very engaged in the brand. And on the floor, they knew decor, like they knew style.
Yep.
And it is the flip side of that if you create a place that people love to work, even in the tough time, that you can, have a competitive advantage over everyone else who's just hiring bodies. Like, am I being naive, or is there still a
No,
chance in this current era?
no, I think you said it perfectly, Dave. It's, creating a work environment that they love, and that's not always easy to do, but it's far from impossible. And I think that comes right from the top down. How the person in charge looks at the business and looks at um, how you what you look like to the public, and how you react to different situations. So I think you're 100% right. I think that is a key to success in any sort of climate, economic climate. You've got to find those people that like what they're doing, because if they don't, it's going to show right away.
Would you pay above market, Rick?
I that you may have to, but I would prefer to look at it different ways. Like, how well you have to look at a little bit of the history within your company as well. How well have you taken care of your employees in times where they are having struggle, whether it's financial, whether it's health, whatever it is that you have to treat. I believe that you have to treat your employees like their family, and except for that uncle that gets drunk at the Christmas dinner, but I don't care that much about him, but the rest I do care about. So I think that is extremely key, and businesses that don't understand that, when you walk in the door, you get that bit of an icy feeling when you walk in, and the ones that do understand it, you get a much warmer feeling when you walk in. And to me, I'm a consumer as well, and I get sucked in by the person that shows up and they're smiling and they want to know more about me, and why I'm there, and not just say, hey, you're in the store now, you're kind of on your own. And I really hate that approach. I want to feel like I'm a friend of that person in the store.
So I think that's a really great call out, Rick, because I think right now it's really hard because we're dealing with masking and social distancing and all the rest of it. And it's hard to build connection when you're wearing a mask and when you're coming into a store. But I think the places I know for me that I gravitate to as a consumer are the ones that I think are going to be the most successful, are exactly as you said. They have a great staff, they have a camaraderie. They've, not only internally have a sense of family and a sense of feeling, but also that sense of, I want to take that customer that comes in the door on a journey with me and have them feel a part of this family and a part of this brand. And I mean, I think even before COVID, that's, the best, most successful brands are like that, and they build that sense of community.
Yep.
And community and connection is just so important to consumers right now, especially when you're at home, in your home office on Zoom 24/7. You want to get out and connect with people in a meaningful way, and be with a brand or go to a store where you feel that connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
The point I sort of, as we talk about staff and trying to acquire talent, we have to understand what talent looks like. Therefore, as leaders, we need to know what that looks like. It's a bit like retailers going after tech. Oh, we just need a bit more tech and we'll be fine. Oh, we just need a bit more talent and we'll be fine. I think that what you're trying to define is a leadership quality. You had it, you just naturally had it because you built the culture. But many businesses that are out there in Canada have a corporate mentality, which may not lend itself to investing in culture and understanding what that culture might need to look like. And that's that behavior that when nobody else is looking, that's what you do, as opposed to what's written on the plaque. So I think it's really important to get for businesses to understand this is a core tenet of success, the culture. What does it mean? What does it need to look like? How do we execute on it?
Yeah. And again, Gary, that goes through every department in your business. Obviously we tend to focus on larger businesses with, thousands of employees, but even if you look at individual, and there are departments within a very small store sometimes, and everybody in that business needs to really understand, again, why you're there, you're not just there to buy yourself a job. If you are, then maybe you shouldn't be in business. Go get a job. But I think, for me, the way I look at business is that I want to do something good. And hey, we could go into a whole other conversation about sustainability and the environment and what you're doing to make the world a little bit better. And even, it's funny, Urban Barn, we were really trying hard at, up until the point where I kind of left. I'm not sure what's happening there now, but, we were looking at being better, being better, a better corporate entity and what we can do to help, outside of just selling furniture. And that just doesn't mean the way we purchase. It means, how much can we give back? And I think that's part of building a great culture too, is that, if your staff understands that you're giving and that they are playing a role in this giving, that, you've got the right kind of people, if you have the right kind of people, they care about that kind of stuff. And you don't necessarily have to pay more for those people. You just have to put up or shut up when it comes to your corporate responsibility platform.
Rick, we talked about people. Now and you mentioned the consumer and yourself as a consumer. Let's stay there with the consumer for a minute. We all agree with you that, I think most of us agree with you, that COVID is here with us. It's our way of life now, and we've got to find ways around it. But when you think about, we know we've got digital marketing, we've got a lot of marketing content that's out there to drive traffic, to drive awareness. But the old school being 2019, there was also a lot of traditional marketing, a lot of traditional efforts in store, outside the store to drive consumers in. Now you've got a sense of that 50 plus group, 50 years old and over, that are going to be, maybe half of them are going to be really uncomfortable by going back out again. How does a retailer now start to reach them?
Well, are you talking about that age group? I don't think there's not that much difference unless you go to a really younger set. I know for a fact, like, I'm an older guy and I'm tech savvy, and I get excited when I see a business that is trying to bring in experience as well as just, while you're here, get your credit card out. Thank you very much. Businesses that are being creative, whether it's pop-up, whether it's, there's so many digital, physical / digital sort of platforms out there now that you can use to really look different and give your consumer a little bit more of an experience. And I think, as a much north of 50-year-old and as a consumer, I want that kind of stuff. There are times that I want to just get in and get out. Actually, I read a really interesting story somewhere that talked about the wow and where you can overplay the wow. So businesses like grocery stores that are, they don't need to have wow. They need to have enough product priced well and somebody to help you get through the door. But there are so many opportunities for businesses to add a little wow here and there. And I think that a lot of them aren't thinking that way. And I know for a fact, you're just not aiming at, millennials or younger. We're the same. I think my age group is the same. We want the same things.
I think that's a great point, Rick. I mean, I think just the creative out of the box thinking, and you were really successful at that. You were telling us stories about some of the things that you did in the past to create excitement and to be really kind of groundbreaking. I mean, the fact that you said that you had a store around the 2010 Olympics and were filming having your senior people in there. I think you said your manager was living in the store and you're filming that. I mean, that's really cool. And that's very forward thinking, and it's creative and creates buzz and excitement. And I think, that's going to be a big challenge for people right now, as we're so scared and there's so much going on. But then how do you break through that to take the opportunity to bring some newness and freshness to maybe stale parts of the market that we've sort of seen in the
past. Christine, and I know we just talked about this, but we're living in a time right now, especially going into another wave. Like we've seen numbers here in BC escalating again, and the last thing I want to do is get political about this, but obviously I think vaccines, everybody should be vaccinated, but it is difficult for a retailer to be creative the way I was, because we had no boundaries then. We could basically do whatever we wanted and bring crowds of people together and interact and hug it out if you needed to. But now you can't do that. So, there's I'll tell you what, I've run into so many creative people, whether it's on the marketing side, promotion side, PR, whatever it is. And there are ways that we're not even thinking about right now to bring people together, to have experiences, whether it is, in this world where we have to be, 6 feet apart and all the other stuff that we have to do and wearing masks. There are a lot of creative ideas out there, and I can't wait. I'm actually excited to see what retail is going to look like over the next 2-3 years. I think it's going to be really interesting.
Can't hear you, David.
On our theme of hashtag scared shitless, the one thing that runs up against this, particularly in furniture, is this tradition of the last few years where everything's about customer acquisition and funded online by investors. So the consumers aren't funding the business, the investors are. Uh-huh. If you're in a traditional entrepreneurial furniture environment, you have to play against that. The only thing I'm seeing, though, is lately I'm seeing more talk about retention. But that drives prices down. And while we need the experience, how do you see that friction going forward? Because any customer is going to reference pricing that they're seeing, right? And then they'll pay a little bit more. But it's not sustainable, I don't believe, a lot of the pricing we see online.
Well, you know what? I think that answer is actually fairly easy. If your company, your business knows your customer, your core customer very well, then don't go away from it. And if you're a business that has become successful on price, you're gonna still have to deal with that. And whether it's buying differently to keep those margins strong, even though prices might be going down. One of the things I know from friends in the industry right now, in the furniture industry, one of the problems is that the Canadian government has slapped fairly large tariffs on product coming from overseas with, in my view, not a lot of thought when it comes to where are these companies going to buy product if they, there's not a lot of Canadian manufacturer. That went away 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because we were making it difficult to, as Canadian manufacturers, to produce product that can compete overseas. It was very simple: India, China, Vietnam. So that's a concern. That would be a concern for me as a furniture retailer. Okay, all of a sudden, some product is 200% tariffs, 200%, and I know there's a wide range, but that the business is not going to, they're not going to eat that. They're going to have to change their pricing. So the consumer is going to have to eat that change until Canadian companies find, supply within Canada. But that's a real issue but again, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that if your business is based on value, that value proposition, and you're selling a great product at a decent price, and you talk about the value, then who cares what the price is? And I don't want, one of my keys always in business was, I don't want a discount, because that customer that's coming for a discount is not going to be a loyal customer. The ones that are prepared to pay the price because they feel that they're getting the value, they're happy with the product, we've given them the service. If there's a problem, we're going to back up whatever we sold, that's my customer right there, and that's the way I looked at it. Now, that might be looking at it in a very tunnel view, because not all businesses are like that. But I think that, most successful businesses have that value proposition, and they don't necessarily worry about pricing.
Rick, so based on all that, all the experience you've got, a wealth of it, and you've seen a lot of retailers out there. If I were to ask you a question here, and the question is, if you were to go back into retail again on your own, what segment of retail would you enter? And would it be physical? Would it be e-commerce only? Would it be hybrid? What would be your play?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I've obviously through Dig 360, we've seen some very interesting businesses. One of the things that I would do is I'd get into a business that had a physical presence and an online presence, and I would do my best to meld the two. And in other words, one of my big things that I keep talking about, and I know it's really difficult to do, is website should look like your store should look like your website, and so not just look, but feel like it. So if your store is based on service and quality and just this experience, then that has to be portrayed on your website. And so many businesses are not doing that. Their website looks different than the business. I've gone to so many websites and going, man, it looks like you spend a pile of money on this website, but it doesn't match what you're doing in store. So I think if I was to get back in, I'd be really creative on, number one, the amount of space that I would take. Even looking at the cannabis retail industry. At the beginning, there are a lot of stores that were, I'd say, for that format, fairly large. There is a change out there to, okay, what am I really providing for this customer? In most cases, they're going to find what they want on their website. They're likely going to order it ahead of time, and they just want to go in and get it and come back out. They don't need a salesperson there to go through all of this. Now, that's not every type of consumer in that segment. There are others that need help. But I'd look at the size of the space that's needed for your business, and what can I do in potentially a smaller space, but make it feel bigger. Give that experience, whether it's through tech, whether it's some other creative use of that space. And, people that know me know how much I've fallen in love with pop-up. And I think the timing is right for businesses to really think a little bit outside of their box. And where can I take my brand and expand on this business without, killing my bottom line by making some really difficult choices when it comes to, leasing extra space or taking on extra expense. So there are a lot of ways that I would, moving forward with whatever category I chose to get into, that I'd really think about those things.
So which category interests you is exciting to you for that right now? Is it apparel? Is it furniture? Obviously cannabis, you've done well. I mean, is there anything else out there that really says, hey, this is a really important segment that's doing well?
Well,
smallmouth bass gear, Rick. Smallmouth bass.
Smallmouth bass, yeah, right. I don't know. I think, I played around with the idea a while back, and Dave knows this, in a sort of a mixture of really cool kind of New York style patisserie, so baked goods, coffee, like all the best stuff, mixed in with specialty grocery, mixed in with sort of meals that are more than what you see sitting in those warming trays, which I hate.
Yeah.
So the grab and go type feel. So one of the things that has always interested me, and I guess really my wife kind of got me thinking about this, because she's in commercial leasing. Food court Food hall. And food hall is really big in the States, and you can do some really interesting things. For instance, could you bring some of the top chefs, especially top young chefs, into one space, give them a little bit of a kiosk, let's call it, and a consumer able to go in, maybe even at the end of the day, order all of the ingredients that you need to take it home and make it, or have it already prepared for you, or even better, at the end of the day, let's say there's 10 different food hall participants there, chefs, and they all produce a grab and go bag, their specialty that day. Wouldn't that be awesome? Just walking in the door, going, you know what? I love the looks of this. I'm taking that bag. I'm paying for it. I'm going home. So that's one thing that I've never been in food service, but those sort of things that you could do in food service, ghost kitchens that are popular now. I think there's some really creative ideas going forward in a sector that's really struggled over the last year and a half. So.
Terrific. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This has been the Business of Retail and the Business of Retail Hot Seat. Join us again next time for another segment. Take care and bye for now.
You have been listening to the Business of Retail podcast, an unflinching strategic alternative to the conventional industry discourse. Thank you for joining us. For more information, please go to www.thebusinessofretail.ca.